Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to number 7 in my series of talks about the history of English detective fiction from 1920 to about 1960. For this evening's subject, I've chosen the London Detection Club. The London Detection Club was a dining circle established in 1928 by the writer Anthony Berkeley and G.K. Chesterton. From the start, it was intended to be a social forum for the premier detective writers of the day, so please, we mustn't confuse it with England's Crime Writers Association, which was started by John Creasy about 25 years later. Admission to the Crime Writers Association rested on the commercial assessment, inevitably driven by publishers, and so in some respects it was the absolute antithesis of the Detection Club. It would have been bad form to apply for membership of the club. To join, you needed to be invited or sounded out, nominated and then elected. In this way, members were able to protect the quality of the club. Now, this may leave the club open to charges of snobbery, and perhaps some elitism was almost inevitable, given the purpose of the group. And remember, an effective dining club can be frustrated by too many seats at the table. To understand this genesis, we must look at the place of detective fiction in England towards the end of the 1920s. The decade had seen the publication of an enviable stream of novels that we recognise today as crime classics. The Red House Mystery, The Cask, Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and thankfully many, many more, as the new breed of crime writers worked to satisfy the burgeoning post-war readership. But still, a section of committed readers refused to have anything to do with the genre. For example, in the late 1930s, Raymond Chandler received a letter from his old classics master saying that he would never touch the stuff. And there was the rub. At this time, detective fiction was too easily linked with the culture of the penny dreadfuls and sensational thrillers. Anthony Berkeley, he used many pen names, was already an experienced journalist, columnist, and novelist before he wrote his first murder story. He quickly recognised not only the validity of the new form, but also its potential. He will become one of the first writers of the inverted detective story, a subgenre where we are told the solution at the start, and our interest concerns how the crime was brought to fruition and the culprit to justice. He saw value in bringing together the best writers of the day with a focus to cement the foundations on which the genre could grow. Working with G.K. Chesterton, he established the London Detection Club in 1928. So who were this Premier League? A list of the early members reads like a roll call of the masters, and it's a testament that hardly 2 or 3 would need any introduction from me. Of the first 25 who joined before 1930, we have Agatha Christie, Dorothy L. Sayers, Ronald Knox, 2 of my own favourites, Freeman Wilscroft and H.C. Bailey. Then there's John Rhodes, Arthur Morrison, Baroness Orsi, and so the list goes on. Berkeley himself gave us a delightful parody of the club in his excellent Poisoned Chocolates case. Now, if the Detection Club is famous for one thing, it is their initiation ceremony, where the new member would swear on Eric the Skull, or science tells us Erica, to abide to the principles of good detective story making. They were asked, "Do you promise that your detectives shall well and truly detect the crimes presented to them, using those wits which it may please you to bestow upon them, and not placing reliance on nor making use of divine revelation, feminine intuition, mumbo-jumbo, jiggery-pokery, coincidence, or an act of God? Do you solemnly swear never to conceal a vital clue from the reader? Do you promise to observe a seemly moderation in the use of gangs, conspiracies, death rays, ghosts, hypnotism, trapdoors, Chinamen, super criminals and lunatics, and utterly and forever forswear mysterious poisons unknown to science? What are we to make of this hocus pocus? On the face of it, not a lot, but the group were recognising a need to avoid sensationalism and to strive for an intellectual puzzle. And, of course, they were establishing, in a not too serious way, clear water between the honest detective fiction and the sensational thriller. The success of the club is evidenced by the long tenure of their presidents. They did not suffer a dutiful year, then pass the baton around the table, but they continued in the role for as long as they were able. You were elected as president by the top practitioners in your craft, so it was an honour not to be taken lightly. It wouldn't be done to step down, and certainly it was not done to oppose an existing chair. The first president was G.K. Chesterton himself, who served from 1928 until 1936. Then E.C. Bentley took over through the war years until 1949. He was followed by 8 years with Dorothy L. Sayers, and then Agatha Christie was the president of the Detection Club for almost 20 years. It is a curiosity that one very active member of the club was an American, albeit with British citizenship. John Dickson Carr's contribution to our genre deserves a podcast to himself, and yes, I will make a note of that. But here we can recognise the enthusiasm that he gave to the club during the years of his membership. Of course, one of Carr's detectives, Dr. Fell, was based on the current president, G.K. Chesterton, and it was disappointing that although he was content to chair Carr's initiation in 1936, Chesterton was by then in too poor a health to do so. In 1931, the club produced a collaboration, The Floating Admiral, primarily to fund its expenditure. This novel, written jointly and severally by the members, gained further recognition of the club's status when the BBC presented its own production of the story. The principle behind The Floating Admiral was that each member would be supplied with the story so far and the eventual solution, and then have to take their turn in supplying the next chapter. Without doubt, the book suffers from this serialisation. It is not a great book, but the first edition is now a cornerstone of any serious collection of English detective fiction. It was as if the premier authors of the time were placing their marker in the sand. Through their diverse styles, they showed not only the scope of the genre, but they gave a clear indication of how the form might be developed. They went on to produce other examples, including Ask a Policeman. The club could hardly avoid being a success. By mixing with fellow writers of a high standard, sharing ideas, problems, frustration, and even ambition, each of the authors was bound to benefit. Dorothy L. Sayers said, "If there is any serious aim behind the avowedly frivolous organisation, it is to keep the detective story up to the highest standard that its nature permits." And it remains today as a dining club with ideals not very far from those of its founders. Well done. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Malcolm Noble. Thank you for listening to this, the 7th in my series of podcasts about the history of English detective fiction from 1920 to about 1960, which tonight featured the London Detection Club. Please remember to like, follow or leave a comment. My website is malcolmnoble.com. I hope you take a look at it. On that site you will find a page listing all of the episodes with appropriate links if you want to catch up with the previous talk. I need to thank Freeze Effects for the royalty-free music. I've posted this talk on the 14th of January and will upload the next one on the 28th of the month. In the meantime, all that remains is for me to thank you once again for listening and to wish you a good night and God bless.